So, season 4 ends the story of the bear. So, the show will continue to go on. It will continue to be entertaining, but I think it's the end of the story as was introduced at the beginning of the show. So, we saw Carmen come to terms with the way he uses cooking to avoid his mental health issues. And he says, I'm going to leave the restaurant behind and I'm going to leave cooking behind. He doesn't love it like he used to, realizing that it's just kind of a bad place for him right now and he needs to actually heal and just be away from it. He needs to come to terms with his brother's death. So for those unfamiliar, The Bear is a TV show about a psychopathic chef whose brother commits suicide. He has to move back to his hometown of Chicago and take over his brother's restaurant. And so the whole conceit of the show is basically that this chef, his name is Carmen, he's like a Michelin star chef. He's like worked with all the best chefs in the world, and now he takes over his brother's restaurant. It's like an Italian sub shop. It's very poorly run. It's depicted as kind of a mess in there, not profitable, in all sorts of weird debt. He not only tries to save the restaurant, but then he opens his own like fine dining restaurant essentially, and all of his family members end up involved and they all try to like put it together. And he has this sidekick named Sydney who is also a wonderful chef herself and sort of ends up becoming like the brains and kind of the heart behind the whole restaurant operation and keeping him in check. So in the finale of season 4, all the main characters of the show end up in just back alley behind the restaurant. The whole episode takes place there. Carmen reveals to Sydney, his co-chef of the restaurant, that he's planning to leave after all this time building it and they finally become barely profitable. He wants to go. He sort of explains why. And if you pay attention when you're watching the show, you kind of see it coming, because he is slowly withdrawing from the kitchen. He's kind of seen less there. He's given up yelling. He's given up trying to get his way on everything. Reaching out to people that he's hurt in the past and trying to see what he can do with them and kind of understand and apologize and make amends. And other people in his life, like his mom, are apologizing to him about stuff that they've done. And he's kind of going on this whole apology tour. And then this all comes to a head when he says, I'm quitting the restaurant. And Sydney's understandably upset. She's like, you're my partner. You're the reason I'm doing all this. Like, how could this be? And the argument essentially goes on for, I think, a half hour, 40 minutes, however long the episode is. Why do we know exactly what goes through Carmen's head at the very end here? Well, in the tradition of great American TV writing, he comes out and he says it like 15 times. He's like, this is why I'm going to leave the restaurant. This is the reason. She's like, you can't leave the restaurant. He's like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And she's like, I hate you so much. So Carmen has this realization that basically resolves the plot of The Bear. So his brother's death in the very first episode is kind of the inciting incident of the show. I would say more so than him having to take on the restaurant and all that. That is kind of the dark crack, which runs through the whole show. And he thinks about his brother constantly and all that. And then the reaction to that is how Carmen acts in sort of very lashing out ways, in a lot of ways that are like cruel to other people and abusive. And like he also does these like grand gestures, such as opening this restaurant and taking over his brother's restaurant. Before that, he tries to change the menu every day, and he's doing all this stuff, and it puts him under immense pressure, and he doesn't really understand why he acts like that. It kind of comes down to his own mental health issues and his brother's death. That all is, of course, hammered home a ton by the show. It's not even subtext, it's just text. That's kind of what the show's about. It's this moment of understanding that makes him realize he needs to quit cooking and go take a step back and go try to figure out what the heck is going on, like who he is as a person. That's something he says a lot in the show. He's like, I need to figure out like what I am, because I don't know, because I just cook all the time. And he's tried other stuff. So he's like, in the fourth and maybe a little bit of the third season, he's already tried to step back and he's tried to be a better person, model the right behaviors, but he seems to thrive on creating chaos and creating a chaotic environment, and a kitchen is already naturally stressful, so that kind of magnifies the whole thing. And I think it's cool because it's like seeing a resolution to a TV show plot that isn't just like achieving a goal or like defeating a villain. It's actually about admitting defeat. So the whole show is kind of resolved by Carmen saying, I just can't do this. Like, I realized that I've been walking down the wrong road for a long time, and I'm taking the first step, you know, in the very opposite direction, maybe. But what is this video about? So the other problem characters face in The Bear is that they're unarticulate. So Carmen, Sydney, Richie, these are all names of characters in the show. They're very honest people, but they don't always have the words to say what they want to say, and I think this is very realistic. So when a writer, you know, they sit down to write a scene in front of a laptop, they have all the time in the world to do it. They have several tries, so they can figure out all the perfect words. And TV writers, they can't write whole episodes by themselves. They just don't know how to do it. So they have this thing called a writer's room, and they have a bunch of people. Those guys all put their heads together, and they write something together. And then producers get involved, and they're like, oh, like, we need to change this and that. And then the director comes on, and they're like, well, I want to do it my way, because, like, directors are supposed to have this whole vision for the show. Also, this whole notion of your writing, like, you cut out, like, filler words because it just makes it easier on the audience. And that all makes sense, and that's all good stuff, but it's not exactly how people talk. And especially when people are arguing or when they're emotional, they have trouble expressing what they mean effectively. This whole final scene in The Bear it's one episode that is the whole scene, and it's not like one of those, like, oh, one take things. It's just, like, in a room the whole time. And the meat of the scene is the argument between Sydney and Carmen. So Carmen, you know, he gets in his self-flagellation where he's apologizing, and Sydney's like, you're a bad guy, like, you can't do this to me, you're, like, self-destructing. Carmen's like, yeah, like, I am, and I'm sorry, and I'm such a bad dude, but I have to do this. And then I wanted to read a little bit from the script here, which I have in front of me, and it's when Sydney kind of turns that all around on him, and she's like, I'm going to apologize to you. And here's what she says. She says, and I'm so sorry that your family has had to go through this stuff. And the fact that you and Nat and Richie have to come to work every day and work your way through this stuff. So the whole time she's saying this, Carmen's saying, he's like, stop it. Because, you know, he hates himself. And so her apologizing to him, it kind of undercuts his whole act where he's like, I'm so sorry, I did this to you. And it just makes him feel, like, incredibly guilty. And so Sydney continues, and she's like, I'm not going to stop because it's awful. And the little of it that I understand, it's a nightmare. And I'm sorry that it happened to you and that it's happening to you. And so the whole time Sydney is emphasizing happened. She's like, this happened to you. And I think Ayo Edebiri, the actress, does a great job when she's acting. She picks such words to emphasize, which isn't always the word you would choose to emphasize if you were reading that line just, like, out loud, like out of a book. And it kind of drives the emotional character of the scene home. And so her last line is, but when you take it out on the restaurant and the people who work here and the business and on me, it's beyond the pale. And so they continue to go in circles again, and basically the whole argument is that he's like, well, I have to quit the restaurant, and she's like, this is just another one of your self-destructive behaviors, blah, blah, blah. They don't really come to a resolution on this. They kind of end up forgiving each other for what they're doing, but there's no, like, bridge of understanding that goes on. It's worth thinking about, like, what does Sydney mean by all this, because, like, on the face of it, you can read the words back and it's a little odd, right? So she's like, I'm sorry that you have to go to work and your cousin has to go to work and your sister and you're going through all this stuff. She's like vaguely gesturing, your life is a nightmare, and I'm sorry it's a nightmare, it's not acceptable. So I mean, it makes sense, but it's just kind of an odd thing to say to someone you're arguing with. The subtext of that, basically, like, what you understand is that, you know, Carmen has his mental health issues. So, like, of course, his brother's death, the stress he puts himself under, his breakup with his girlfriend, that was, like, his fault, his mother, all the stress of that. And Sydney's aware of it all, obviously, because she's in the show, she's involved in his life, and she's seen, you know, how it hurts him and other people. All she's trying to say is that she gets it, and, you know, it's unacceptable anyway. And I think the last part where she moralizes the whole argument, where she's like, she's sorry she has to deal with that, but it's bad that he acts like that. That's also some kind of, like, TV writer magic, where you're kind of, like, dumbing it down. You're like, and also that's bad. You know, like, you gotta just tell people that things are bad sometimes. Otherwise, like, you know, you're letting them get away with it. You can't let Carmen get away with it. But whatever. So, you know, Carmen realizes he's a bad guy at that point. But the other stuff she's saying, I think it's great it's great writing. So like it's writing that expects the listener to understand, context and the whole plot of the show to build up to that point. And so she's just saying stuff like very emotionally, very raw, and just with very simple words and just bringing it out. And I think that just kind of drives down to the emotional core of it. And I think it's more concise, it's more emotive to write like that sometimes, like if you can get away with it. She's just like, I'm sorry all this stuff happened. Obviously, she doesn't say stuff. This lack of specificity is really interesting to me. I think maybe because that's something we're taught to avoid when writing, descriptions. Like you wouldn't say, oh, there's a bunch of stuff on the ground, right? Like that you would write what is on the ground, like just as an example. But for dialogue, like I think you can totally go for that if you can. If you can just sort of earn that trust from your audience. And I think as writers, we're trying to find some piece of humanity and get in touch with that, and we're trying to record it and then make somebody else experience it. The closer you can get to the way real people talk and the way they express themselves and when they're really feeling something, you might get towards some more emotional writing. And I think that's not like a be-all end-all. Like I think a lot of books make great use of dialogue that is like more out there or just more formal and proper, and not just the style they're going for. And I don't think that's better or worse or anything. I'm just saying this is one tool that you have to use. Interesting to talk about television in the context of writing, because film people are very lucky because they get to fill in all those details themselves. Because if you think about it, like even the box that I'm trapped in right now, the whole box is being filmed. The whole box is being filled with details. You have audio right on each side, so you basically have like a whole sensory experience. And so when you're watching a movie, you know what color the leaves were that day, you know how fast the wind was blowing, you know how each character's hair looked that day, how old they were, how they were feeling, their facial expressions. And that's like a great power because it allows filmmakers to just say like, here you go, here's the performances, here's the setting, everything is there, because their medium is reality. But I think that can also be a crutch, right? Like that's laziness, because like you're kind of obviously going to curate everything in a scene, so you just kind of have to find something or create something and say this is close enough to my intent. Whereas in writing in like a prose form, everything is intentional. Like you're supposed to like really point out specific things but not other things, and it's more of like a collaboration with the reader to fill in details. So when you're writing dialogue, that's where the authors of and TV writers become equal, because even if your actors are made of flesh and bones, you still have to like puppet them and you have to make them move and speak in the way you want. So you have to like still go through that work of writing that dialogue and making it sound good, because if you have very like wooden dialogue, you have kind of dialogue that is just very like very telly and not showy, and like it's just not how people talk. Like there's no actor that can really save that. I mean, some of them can a little bit, but it's just not always a thing. So what do I do? So in writing my book, I didn't actually go for like the conciseness, but I think that's something I want to keep improving on, and I wanted to keep looking at was the natural meter of talking. And I remember being very young writing, and I was thinking, like, writing's so easy, like, I just write exactly how I talk. A lot of that, came through in the book. A lot of it didn't. And one thing I wanted to do, and something I did a lot, was characters that rant, characters that are very talkative, because that's a whole other side of the coin that I'm describing here, right? Because if someone's having trouble expressing themselves, if someone's, like, not really sure of themselves, then they might also be very long-winded. They might not be very concise, because, I think it was Mark Twain that said, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one, because like compressing ideas takes work, right? So it's work on behalf of the writers, work on behalf of the person thinking, to make everything fit in a smaller cage. And so like when I'm making a YouTube video, I want to make it longer, so I might not even precisely bound myself to a script. I'm just so that I can pad more time, so keep people watching longer. So I was thinking about that, and I have a lot of good rants, and I could read any of them to you. I wanted to challenge myself to find a place where I I think I had characters say like something very little, something small, and then kind of have more to show from that. Like it's sort of like a little thing that more blossoms from. And so I started chapter 17 just with this little bit of dialogue. So Connor is walking somewhere with his girlfriend Kara, and he's talking to her, and this is what he says. So this is the very start of the chapter. He says, "I washed your shirt this morning," Connor said. He watched for her reaction, watching the hair fall in and out of her face. "I didn't mean to. It got mixed in with mine." So I don't know. I mean, it's good and bad, right? But what I realized about it when I was reading is that I sort of like it for some reason. I have trouble explaining in a way that's good for a YouTube video. But it's just like, I feel like he's kind of like extending a rope to her. He's kind of holding out his hand to her, and he's like, well, I did this for you. And then he's kind of seeing what he gets back in response. Like it's kind of like a trial balloon for a relationship, like sort of seeing how they are right now. And it's also just kind of a brief statement of kind of like an act of care, an act of like belonging with another person. It's like, hey, like I washed your shirt by accident. It's almost an apology. It's like halfway there to an apology, but it isn't. It's kind of one of those weird things that as people we say sometimes. And so I want to talk about dialogue more on this channel. I find it very interesting. I find it one of the most interesting parts of writing, to the point where I'm trying to improve my descriptions, my scenes, because I'm a very chronic underwriter. Like I feel like I just go right through stuff, and part of that is I can write a lot of dialogue, and then I'm like, well, then this and this happened, and that's it. I want to really immerse people in more parts of the world that I'm building, and I want people to be able to connect with different parts of the work, and not just like, oh, this guy said a funny thing, he said a relatable thing. Because, you know, relatability is a crutch as well. I think it's not like, I shouldn't just be thinking like, how can I make someone laugh when I'm writing a book? Like I have to do more, I have to be better. I guess to conclude the video, I think you should watch The Bear, because, you know, I don't know, I think mental health is important in scare quotes. I don't think that's such an interesting topic for a TV show at large on the face of it. I think if you just sort of think about it in the way where you like watch that show and you're like, I wish like I could make someone feel the emotion that I'm feeling right now at a lot of that stuff. And it's not to say that's a perfect show or like everything is done well or with like great taste. But what it does well is I think it does a really good job making people feel emotions, I think. When I say stuff in this video that is like irrational or like clearly wrong on the face of it, I hope you guys understand that I'm just doing that to be funny. I don't think Carmen Berzado is a psychopath necessarily. If anything, the opposite, and I hope that's been revealed by my analysis of him today. And I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, lunch, wherever you are. I hope you annihilate that like button, and I hope, you know, take a look at my book. It's a pretty good book. It's okay. Next one will be better. So if you don't want to read this one, the next one will be better. You know, just hop on that mailing list, like and subscribe. Here's me on the back of the book. That's me, dude. And I have an ISBN. So once you have that, you're a big deal. So that's all I have to say. I'm Nick. I'm not wearing any pants. I'll see you later.